Hi, welcome to this lecture. Now, our main aim is to use the guide argument and supply its values using the guide legend function. Now, let us look at this usual. We use this data set for demonstration purposes. Okay, so let's come in here and say we are looking at the relationship between these two variables. Now I'm going to try and first add the colors. So now we're going to add the color, and we want to color by this variable. Okay, now what's going to follow is I'm going to come in here and add the scale. Okay, now I want to modify the color, then I'm going to say manual. Right, remember we can pass in values in order to try and change the colors. So in this case I'm going to say red, then following is blue, then what's going to follow is green. So let's run this so you can see we have managed to modify the colors. Now our first step is to try and look at the title alignment. Okay, so the horizontal alignment of the title can be managed when we use title, then its horizontal adjustment argument. Okay, this argument will take values between 0 and 1. So let us look at what do I mean by that. So we come in here, right? So now we want to use guide argument. Okay, now what we're doing is that we're going to use guide underscore, then we specify legend. Okay, so I'm going to move this a little bit. For now we want to look at the title alignment. Now let us add the title and let us specify cylinders. Okay, this is also another way in which you can add a title to your legend. Now let us go ahead and use title horizontal adjustment, and we have a vertical adjustment. So if we come in here, remember that this argument takes any value between 0 and 1, right? So if we want, for example, to align this to the center, we're going to say 0.5, and let's run this. Okay, now you observe what has happened is that this title is now aligned to the center. Okay, so let's say we come in here and we specify, for example, 0.9. So what happens to our plot? Let me bring this plot here, try to expand this. Now if you supply 0.9, for example, so you run this, so you observe that our title is shifting if we are at if we keep on modifying title horizontal adjustment. Okay, so you should take note of that. We can also come in here and have title vertical adjustment. Okay, so now if you run this, when you talk about vertical, you can see it's shifting vertically. Okay, so now if we want to supply 0.5, for example, it is shifted downwards. We can also come in here and now we specify the title position, right? So if you come in here, we specify the title position, and let's say, for example, you say top, and let's run this. Now what has happened is that nothing has changed because our title, it was by default at the top. So if we come in here and say bottom, so run this, now what has happened is that this title is now at the bottom of this legend. So that is how you can try to shift your title by position. So you come in here and say the title position. So in this case it was bottom, and you can also specify left you can see now our title is on the left. Okay, but the default one is simply top, which looks a little bit much better. So now we have looked at how can we manage the vertical alignment of the title as well as the horizontal alignment of the title. We have also looked at how can we change the name. Now we are using guide argument. Okay, we have this now guide legend function, and we are now passing the title in this function as well as the vertical adjustment as well as the position. Now, remember that in this legend, we have been looking at how can we modify the labels. We can also position the labels either at the top, bottom, left, or right. So let us see how can we do that. So if you come in here, okay, now what you want to do is you come in here inside. I'm going to clear the console. Now let us position the label. How can you do that? So we have to come inside guide legend function, and inside this function what you're going to do is we are going to say label.position, and now the position, the default one, is on the right. But what if we come here and specify left? You can see now the label is on the left. Okay, you can also come and say we want the label at the top. Run this. You can see now the label is at the top. So that is how you can try and position the labels. We can also have bottom. Okay, now you can see that the label is at the bottom in your legend. Okay, so now that is exactly why we started by understanding how can we simply just use the arguments that are provided in this scale function before we even move into understanding the guide. Because with the guide now we're even going more deeper. What also we can do is we can be able to control the horizontal alignment of the labels as well as the vertical alignments. So how can you do that? So I'm going to calculate the console, and I'm going to come in here and say I'm going to remove the label position. Now we want to focus on the alignment. So the first thing that we want to do is we want to understand the horizontal. See, horizontal alignment. Okay, so if we come in here and say horizontal and we pass in 0.5 and we run this, and now let's say we pass in say another value, say 0. Let's use 0.8. So now if you pass in 0.8, you observe now that this the alignment is changing horizontally. Now I want us to understand the alignment vertically. But now let's say we have ggplot empty cars, but now we want to color by a continuous variable. So let's come in here and say, right? So what we want to do is I'm going to pass the aesthetics, and then it's miles per gallon. Now I want us to color by the horsepower. Okay, so if you run this, now if we come here and say scale underscore, remember the aesthetic is power, it's color, then it's continuous. Now when we want to modify this argument, which is guide, when we come here, instead of specifying as we have been doing guide underscore legend, we come here and say guide underscore color bar. Okay, now what is it that we want to modify? In this case, we want to modify the vertical adjustment, and we assign that it says 0.8. Now let's run this. So now we have, so it won't show that much different, but we were looking at how can we align these labels vertically. Okay, in this case, we used guide color bar and we said label vertical adjustment or alignment. So you can see here, if we say we pass in 0.9, you can see, or say for example we also pass in 0.7, so it's aligning these labels vertically. So that is how you can do that, by making use of the guide argument. Now, what about the direction? So let's look at this. Now let us return to our example where we were coloring using the categorical variable. So I'm going to say point, and I'm going to specify the aesthetics, displacement, then it's miles per gallon, then it's color, so it's cylinder. Okay, so let's run this. So now what I want us to understand is we can also focus on directions of the labels, so they can either be horizontal or vertical. Okay, so we want to use also guide argument. So how can we do that? So come in here. Now we're gonna add this function. Remember, it's color, then it's going to be manual. Okay, then let's say for example we also want our own colors, so we're going to have to pass in this vector of colors. Red, let's say green, let's say blue. So now inside this function we want this argument, which is guide. Then we want to say guide underscore legend. Then we can modify the direction and set the direction, for example, to horizontal. Okay, so what we have just done here is that we are simply just modifying the direction of the labels. So let's run this. So now what you can see is that now this is now what? Horizontally. We can also go ahead and even specify the number of rows. So you can see when we come in here, instead of specifying the direction, we can simply just come in here and say the number of rows, we simply just want it to be 2, right? So what has this done is that it has spread the label across multiple rows. Okay, so we use this nrow argument. Do not confuse this argument with aligning your labels horizontally. Previously, we aligned them horizontally because initially they were vertical. Now, what we did here is that we said we want to align these labels by the number of rows. Now, in this case, we only wanted 1 and 2 rows. So, for example, if we had additional number of cylinders, we will see those number of cylinders also being added in this case. So in that case, we have managed to control the number of rows. Okay, so in this case, we specify 2. So let's say we specify 3. You can see now that the number of rows is 3. 1, 2, and 3. Okay, so do not get confused. Now, as you can see, if we can look at the order, it's number 4, 6, and 8. But we can also reverse this order. We simply just come in here. Now I'm going to come here and say reverse. I'm going to set this to true. And if I run this, what you're observing is now we have 8, 6, and 4. So that is how you can also reverse the order of the labels inside this legend. Okay, we are now using guide function.